I did
Boys.
not mean to sit with my boots hanging over a cliff that morning. I
Good
planned to check
boys.
a ridge, swap a trail camera, and be back at the truck before noon. But the mountains changed the plan. When I leaned out to see where the faint crying came from, I saw three snow leopard cubs crowded on a stone ledge the size of a kitchen table, just below my feet, staring up like I was the only rope in the world. For a few seconds I froze. The wind pushed cold air up the rock and made the little ones blink. One tried to stand, slipped a few inches, and pressed tight against its siblings. The drop below them was open air and broken trees. If they moved the wrong way, they would be gone. I felt every muscle in my legs wake up. I said quietly that I was here and it would be all right. Saying it out loud steadied my breathing. I looked around at the ridge. The ledge sat under a cracked block of granite. To the left there was a shallow chimney I could use to downclimb. To the right the wall turned smooth and useless. The cubs kept watching me, barely making a sound now, just a thin whine that hit somewhere behind my ribs. Yesterday I had hiked in with my friend Ben, a seasonal ranger who knew this range better than I did. We had split before lunch because a storm threatened and he wanted to check a lower trail. I carried the light climbing kit we used for camera work, a coil of static rope, a handful of carabiners, one harness that is basically webbing and buckles. Nothing fancy, but enough. I was alone on this ridge, and cell service in these mountains is a rumor, not a plan. I knew I should back out, scramble to the truck, and call the field office, but time would eat those miles. The cubs had already fallen once. Their fur was dusty and matted, and the smallest one's flank rose too fast when it breathed. Waiting felt like choosing the wrong kind of story to tell later. I said the plan out loud to make it real. I would anchor to the stubby pine 10 steps back from the rim, drop a line, clip myself in, and move down the chimney. I would keep my eyes on my feet and not on the depth of the air below. I would move slow enough to think, but not slow enough to doubt. The pine held a root ball wedged between boulders. I wrapped the rope, tied a figure eight, and leaned my weight against it until the bark creaked and settled. I slid into the harness and checked it twice with the habit that never leaves once you learn to check. I set my pack where the cubs could not knock anything loose. I breathed once, then again. I spoke softly that I was coming. The cubs pressed together, tails curled, ears flat, but eyes steady. They were too young to understand intent, only tone. The first step down the chimney scraped my knee. Pebbles rattled and fell into the trees below, and the sound went on much longer than I wanted to hear. I felt the rope across my back, saw dust rise from the ledge, and kept moving. My hands found holds that were not there until I needed them. The cliff face warmed by late sun felt like sandpaper through my gloves. When I reached the level of the ledge, I stopped and locked off the device so I could stand. Up close, the cubs looked smaller than they had from above, and also more alive. Their noses were gray with dust. Their paws were scraped. The smallest one's whiskers trembled every time I shifted my weight. I kept my voice low. I said that I needed them to be brave for a few minutes. I tried to make my face quiet. I reached across the edge slowly, palm up, letting them smell leather and dirt. The bold one stepped forward first. It was not confidence, just the kind of curiosity that makes survival possible. I lifted it under the chest as if it were a heavy house cat and set it against my stomach. It tensed, then went still. I turned and pinned my hips against the rock so I could move one hand to the rope. I inched up until my head rose over the rim. The pine held. My boots found the stone shelf where I had been sitting. I slid the cub onto the flat ground above and backed away so it would not run toward the edge. The first one paced in a tight circle, then tucked itself under a dead branch and watched me. My hands were shaking, but not from fear now. It was the kind of tremor your body uses to pay a bill it just wrote. Back down. The second cub pressed against the third. I tried to take the smaller one, but the larger shifted and nearly stepped into thin air. I moved faster than I wanted to and blocked it with my forearm. It hissed once, a dry, cat-like sound, and then went silent. I gathered the smaller one, felt its heart against my wrist, and climbed. Near the top, a fist-sized stone broke out under my foot. I swung hard into the chimney, and the rope went tight across my harness. Bark flaked from the pine, and I heard the sound of fiber straining. I said out loud that we were okay. Maybe I said it to the tree as much as to the cub. I placed my feet again and pushed up. The second cub reached the ground and crawled straight to its sibling under the branch. The last trip down felt longer. The third cub had decided it was done trusting gravity. It tried to slide behind a bruise-colored rock at the back of the ledge, a space barely big enough for its shoulders. I could not reach it without shifting my stance to a bad angle. I said gently that I needed one more favor. I tapped the rock with my fingertips, soft, rhythmic, like I had seen biologists do when they needed to move an animal without grabbing it. The cub backed out an inch, then another. I kept the pattern. When it was close enough, I scooped it and held it tight. It wriggled once and then went heavy with the simple wisdom of letting a stronger thing carry the weight for a minute. Halfway up, the rope slipped an inch through the device with a sharp sound. My stomach dropped. I reset my brake hand and pressed my back against the wall. Dust filled my mouth with the taste of old pennies. I waited until my breath came back in an even count. One hand, then the other. One step, then the next. When my boots reached the rim again, I felt a pressure behind my eyes that had nothing to do with wind. All three cubs crouched together, their bodies touching. The smallest blinked slowly, then leaned its head against the leg of the bolder one in a gesture that any family would understand. I sat down well back from the edge and pulled the rope in coils so I would not have to look at the drop. I did a quick check. No open wounds, only scrapes. No limp, only caution. I opened my pack and set out a water bottle, then slid a folded bandana into the cap as a wick. The cubs sniffed the damp cloth and one of them licked it once, then again. I kept my hands still and let them decide. I wanted to believe their mother was close. Snow leopard mothers keep their dens hard to find, and they move when they must. The ledge where they had been trapped did not look like a den. It looked like a bad landing after a scramble. Maybe the mother had tried to climb back and failed. Maybe she was below, circling, waiting for the shaking to stop. Ben's voice came thin and choppy on the radio I had clipped to my shoulder. He said he was back near the truck and asked if I needed a hand. I told him I had 3 small reasons to say yes and gave him the ridge line. He swore softly, the way rangers do when their blood spikes, but their training tells them to keep the volume low. He said he was on his way. While I waited, I placed the trail camera on a small trunk facing the flat where the cubs rested. If their mother came back, I wanted proof, for records and for the part of me that needed to see the circle close. I set the timer and checked the angle twice. The cubs watched me like I was moving furniture in their living room. Ben reached me just as the sun started to tilt. He saw the rope, saw the cubs, and blew out a breath. He said I had either done something great or something very dumb, and he figured it was both. He set his pack down and took a slow knee to keep his shape low. The cubs did not run. They were tired the way stones are tired at the end of day. We agreed we would back away and give the slope quiet. We moved uphill, found a spot with good sight lines, and waited. The mountains can squeeze time until you stop arguing with it. The wind turned and brought the smell of pine sap and cold water. A hawk crossed the valley in a straight line like it was late for a meeting. Dusk softened the edges of the ridge when a shape appeared at the lower seam of the rock. I did not see her at first. Ben touched my sleeve and pointed. The snow leopard mother rose from a patch of brush like she had been poured from it. She scanned the flat for danger, then moved forward with a pace that says this is mine. The cubs stood and chattered in a broken, high sound. She reached them and pressed her face against each in turn, the way parents count without numbers. My throat pulled tight. We stayed still. The mother lifted her head once, looked past us, and then led the cubs toward the darker slope where the trees grow tight. She did not run. She did not hurry. She moved like a fact that did not need to announce itself. The cubs followed, tiny shadows pressed to a larger one, stepping where she stepped with the exactness of practice learned in one afternoon the hard way. We waited until the night took the color out of the rock. Then we collected our rope and began the careful walk off the ridge. The trail to the truck felt longer than it had that morning, like the mountain had added a few switchbacks while we were busy. Today, a week later, I am at my desk with the footage open. The camera we left on the ridge recorded the reunion in a neat sequence of stills. In one frame, the ledge is empty. In the next, the mother is there, eyes focused, muscles under her coat like braided rope. In the next, the cubs press close and the smallest touches its nose to her chest. There is a later frame where the slope is empty again, the kind of emptiness that means the right things went where they were supposed to go. I called Ben this morning and told him I was watching those frames again. He said he had looked too, late at night when the station was quiet. He said he did not tell the story as a rescue so much as a correction. The mountain had made a mistake, We nudged it back a few inches. I like that. People ask why I keep going back to places that can kill you if you put your foot wrong once. Here is the best answer I have. The work is simple. You listen for trouble. You show up with the tools you have. You move slow enough to keep your hands honest. And when the world gives you 3 small lives trembling on a ledge, you lean in and do the math that only your chest knows how to do. I still remember how the last cub went heavy in my arms, how trust can be as brief and exact as the depth of a breath. I remember the sound of the rope when it slid that 1 inch and the way the pine held anyway. I remember the mother's head turning and the way she decided we were not an important detail. That was the gift. I keep the bandana I used as a wick folded in the top pocket of my pack now. It smells like granite dust and cold air. When the next call comes, and there is always a next call, I will take it out and think about that ridge, those 3 small bodies pressed together, and the way they walked away when the light went soft. That is enough to keep any heart working the long jobs. If you ever find yourself on a trail and you hear a sound that does not fit the wind or the birds, stop. Listen. There are moments when you are the only rope in the world. On that ridge, I said it would be all right. For once it was. And that is the kind of quiet miracle that does not need more words than the ones I have already used.